You know what that is. You know exactly what it does. I spent 3 years learning every pressure point in that system, every fail-safe, every way it could break. Then show me. Somewhere in a storage box in Anacostia, there is a photograph of Lydia Barber at 24, standing in front of a nuclear cooling tower in a hard hat 2 sizes too big, grinning like she had just conquered something. 7 years later, she would be pouring champagne at her cousin's wedding in a borrowed catering uniform while her aunt announced to a ballroom full of wealthy guests that this was the relative who cleaned houses for a living. The same night, a man the Korean papers called untouchable would cross that ballroom floor and ask her to dance. And within 6 weeks, she would be the only person standing between his family's factory and a disaster that could have irradiated half of Muju. How does a woman go from being humiliated in front of 200 guests to being the one person a mafia boss trusts with his life? Stay with this one, because the moment he took her hand on that dance floor is only the beginning. This story does not end the way you think it will. If this story left you with that warm, quiet feeling, drop a comment and tell me the moment you felt them finally stop being afraid. Those are my favorite comments to read. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, and I promise the next story will be even harder to walk away from. Thank you for watching until the very end. I will see you in the next one. The wedding was held on the 19th floor of a building in Seogwipo, on Jeju Island, where the hanbok atelier had been converted into a reception hall for the evening. Autumn maple leaves scattered across the terrace in the October wind. Lydia remembers the particular orange of those leaves against the glass, the way they looked like small fires falling. She remembers the weight of the silver tray in her hands. She remembers her aunt's voice cutting through the string quartet. But mostly she remembers the 11 seconds of silence that followed. The way 200 faces turned toward her at once. The way her cousin, the bride, looked away first. Lydia Barber was 31 years old, an overnight call center supervisor who had once held a security clearance high enough to make her current life feel like a joke she was living inside. She had flown to Jeju for family. She had agreed to work the catering shift because her aunt had framed it as helping out, as pitching in, as what family does. She had not agreed to be made an example of. 3 weeks before that ballroom, Lydia Barber was sitting in a plastic chair in the break room of a call center in Arlington, Virginia, eating a ham sandwich at 2:47 in the morning and reading an email from her aunt. The email was 400 words long. Lydia had read it 4 times. The subject line said, "Family opportunity," and the body explained that her cousin Delia was getting married in Jeju, that the wedding would be beautiful, that all of the important people in the family would be there, and that since Lydia was between things right now, perhaps she might like to help with the catering. Just for the evening, just to pitch in, just to show she was still part of the family despite everything. Lydia Barber was 31 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, born in Southeast Washington and raised in Anacostia, a block from the record shop where she had first heard Marvin Gaye. She had a degree in nuclear engineering from Howard University. She had spent 3 years as a systems engineer at a power plant in Virginia, monitoring cooling systems and running safety drills and learning every pressure point in a reactor core. She had held a security clearance that took 14 months to process. She had been good at her job. She had been very good. Then her mother got sick. Then the bills arrived. Then the choices narrowed. Now she supervised overnight shifts at a call center, managing a floor of 23 people who answered customer complaints about a regional phone company. She made $42,000 a year. She lived alone. She had not been home for a family event in 6 years. The email from her aunt was the first direct communication she had received from Young-suk Mok in almost 4 of those years. The last one had been a Christmas card with her name spelled wrong. So what did she do? She said yes, because that is what Lydia Barber did when family asked for something. She said yes, and she booked a flight she could not quite afford, and she told herself that maybe this time would be different. Maybe her aunt had softened. Maybe the distance had healed something. Maybe she was being paranoid. She was not being paranoid. Jung Suk-mok ran the Barber family the way some women run small countries. She was 63 years old, immaculately dressed, and in possession of a voice that could silence a room from 40 feet away. She had married into money and then outlived it, and now she maintained her position through sheer force of will and a network of obligations that stretched across 3 continents. Her daughter's wedding was not a celebration. It was a performance. Every guest had been selected for what they represented. Every seat assignment had been negotiated like a treaty. Lydia understood this the moment she landed in Jeju. Her aunt met her at the airport with an embrace that lasted exactly long enough to be photographed. The conversation in the car was warm and distant, full of questions that did not wait for answers. How was Washington? How was the job? Was she seeing anyone? Her aunt's eyes were already on her phone before Lydia finished the first sentence. The catering uniform was waiting in her hotel room. White shirt, black pants, black apron. Her name was not on the guest list. Her name was on the staff roster. "You understand?" her aunt said when Lydia called to ask about it. "We are over capacity. The seating is fixed. But this way you can still be there. This way you can still participate." Lydia understood. She understood exactly. She ironed the shirt. She polished her shoes. She arrived at the venue 2 hours before the ceremony and learned the layout of the 19th floor, the hanbok atelier that had been transformed into a reception hall with white silk draped across the fitting mirrors. She learned where the champagne was stored. She learned the names of the other servers. She did not tell any of them that the bride was her cousin. The wedding itself was beautiful. Lydia watched it from the service corridor through a crack in the door. Delia wore a hanbok in pale green, and the groom was a man Lydia had never met, someone from a shipping family her aunt had been cultivating for years. They looked happy. Lydia hoped they actually were. Then the reception began, and Lydia picked up her silver tray, and she walked out onto that floor. The first hour was fine. She circulated. She smiled. She poured champagne with a steady hand and kept her eyes on the glasses rather than the faces. She recognized some of the guests from old photographs, cousins and uncles she had not seen since childhood, but none of them recognized her. She had been gone too long. She had faded from the family memory. That might have been enough. That might have been the whole story, a quiet humiliation absorbed in private, a flight home in 2 days with nothing changed. Then her aunt stepped onto the small stage where the string quartet had been playing and asked for everyone's attention. Lydia was near the back of the room when it happened. She had just refilled a tray. The weight of it was familiar in her hands, 6 glasses arranged in a perfect grid. She looked up when the music stopped. "I want to take a moment," Jung Suk-mok said, "to acknowledge everyone who made this evening possible. The caterers, the florists, the musicians." She smiled. Her teeth were very white. "And of course, my niece Lydia, who flew all the way from Washington to help serve tonight." A pause. The word serve landed like a stone in still water. "Some of you may remember her. She used to have such promise." Another pause. "Now she cleans houses for a living, but family is family, and we are grateful for her help." Lydia did not clean houses. Lydia had never cleaned houses. Lydia supervised a call center, which was not glamorous, but was also not what her aunt had just said. None of that mattered. What mattered was the 200 faces turning toward her. What mattered was the way her cousin, the bride, looked at her for 1 long second and then looked away. What mattered was the 11 seconds of silence that followed, the silence in which Lydia Barber stood holding a tray of champagne glasses and understood finally why her aunt had invited her. She had not been invited to participate. She had been invited to be an example, the relative who had fallen, the cautionary tale, the proof that Jung Suk-mok's standards were high and her judgment was correct. Lydia did not drop the tray. She did not cry. She did not walk out. She stood there, and she let the moment pass over her like a wave, and then she continued serving champagne. That is when Jongin Cho noticed her. He was standing near the terrace doors, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching the room the way a man watches a chessboard. He was 26 years old, lean and quiet, and dressed in a suit that fit him like it had been built around his body. The Korean papers called him untouchable. But that was not quite right. He was not untouchable because no one could reach him. He was untouchable because no one wanted to try. Jongin Cho had founded a chain of Korean fusion restaurants that had broken out internationally after a video of him cooking went viral. That was the public story. The private story was more complicated, involving a family whose name appeared in police files more often than in food magazines, and a reputation for knowing things about people that he should not have been able to know. He had been watching Lydia for most of the evening. Not obviously, not in a way anyone else would have noticed. But he had seen her arrive. He had seen the way she moved through the room, precise and contained. He had seen the way she held herself apart from the other servers, like she was performing a role she had not quite agreed to. And he had heard what her aunt said. In the 11 seconds of silence that followed, while 200 guests stared at Lydia Barber and her cousin looked away and her aunt smiled that perfect white smile, Jongin Cho did something he almost never did. He set down his glass. He walked across the ballroom floor. He stopped in front of Lydia, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath and something else underneath it, something clean and sharp like cedar. "May I have this dance?" he said. It was not a question. His voice was low and calm, the voice of a man who had never in his life had to ask twice. The string quartet had not started playing again. The room was still silent. Every eye in the place was on them now, but he did not seem to notice or care. Lydia looked at him. She did not know who he was. She did not know why he was standing in front of her. She knew only that he was the first person in that room who had looked at her like she was a person and not a prop. "I'm working," she said. "No," he said. "You are not." He took the tray from her hands. He set it on the nearest table. He turned back to her and held out his hand, palm up, steady as a surgeon's. "May I have this dance?" he said again. This time, Lydia heard the question inside the statement. He was not commanding her. He was offering her a way out of this room that did not involve running. A way to be seen as something other than what her aunt had just declared her to be. She took his hand. The quartet began to play because someone had signaled them, or because musicians know when a moment requires music. Jongin Cho led her onto the floor, into the center of the room, and he danced with her the way a man dances when he wants everyone watching to understand something specific. "Who are you?" Lydia said, quiet enough that only he could hear. "Jongin Cho," he said. "And you are Lydia Barber, and you are not a house cleaner, and your aunt is currently trying to decide whether to be furious or afraid." Lydia glanced toward the stage. Her aunt was standing very still, her smile frozen, her eyes tracking them across the floor. "How do you know what I am?" Lydia said. "Your hands," Jongin said. "The way you held that tray. You were trained for something that required precision, not hospitality, something technical." He turned her gently, moving them through a basic waltz step. "Also, you read the emergency exits when you entered the room, 3 times. That is not a habit cleaners develop." Lydia said nothing. She let him lead. She tried not to think about the 200 people watching them, or her aunt's frozen smile, or the fact that she was dancing with a stranger in a borrowed uniform while autumn leaves scattered against the terrace glass like small fires falling. "Why?" she said finally. "Why what? Why did you do this? You do not know me." Jongin Cho looked at her. His face was calm, but something moved behind his eyes, something that might have been recognition. "No," he said. "I do not know you. But I know that woman on the stage. and I know what it costs to stand in a room full of people who have decided what you are before you open your mouth." The song ended. Jongin stepped back. He bowed to her, a small formal gesture that somehow made the borrowed uniform feel like a gown. "There is a hunting lodge in Muju," he said. "My family owns a factory there. I think we will meet again, Lydia Barber. And when we do, I would like to know what you were before you became whatever she says you are." He walked away. The room exhaled. The quartet began another song. And Lydia Barber stood in the center of that ballroom floor, alone, watched by 200 guests and one frozen aunt, and she understood that something had just changed. She did not know what. She did not know how much. But she knew it had started. The morning after the wedding, Lydia woke in her hotel room to 17 missed calls from her aunt and one text message from a number she did not recognize. The text said, "The lodge in Muju, 2 weeks. If you want to know why your aunt is afraid of me." She did not respond. She packed her bag. She flew home to Arlington. For 3 days, she worked her overnight shifts and slept her daylight hours and tried to pretend that the ballroom had not happened, that the dance had not happened, that a man she had never met had not looked at her across a room full of people who thought they knew what she was and seen something else entirely. On the 4th day, her aunt called. Lydia was sitting in her apartment, a one-bedroom in a building that smelled faintly of mildew, eating leftover rice and watching the evening news. The phone rang. She looked at the name on the screen. She answered. "You have humiliated this family," Jong-suk-mok said. No greeting, no preamble. Her voice was tight with something that sounded almost like fear. "I danced with someone," Lydia said, "at a wedding. You danced with Jongin Cho. In front of everyone I have spent years cultivating. Do you have any idea who that man is?" Lydia did not answer. She had looked him up, of course. The restaurant chain, the viral video, the family name that appeared in articles about organized crime in Busan, the way every profile described him the same way, quiet, perceptive, and impossible to read. "He is dangerous," her aunt said. "He is connected to people who are dangerous. And you stood in the middle of my daughter's wedding and let him make a spectacle of you." "He made a spectacle of me," Lydia said. Her voice was flat. "Not what you did, not the announcement, just the dance." A pause. Lydia could hear her aunt breathing. "I was trying to help you," Jong-suk-mok said. "I was trying to give you a chance to be part of this family again, to show that you could be useful. And instead, you told 200 people I clean houses for a living. You work at a call center. The distinction is not meaningful." Lydia closed her eyes. She thought about the silver tray, the weight of it in her hands, the 11 seconds of silence, the way her cousin had looked away. "Why did you really invite me?" she said. Her aunt did not answer immediately. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, harder, more honest. "Because Delia's in-laws asked about you. They had heard rumors. A cousin with a nuclear engineering degree who had simply vanished. They wanted to know if you were an embarrassment or an asset." A pause. "I showed them which." Lydia sat very still. The apartment felt smaller than it had a moment ago. "I think we are done," she said. "We are not done until I say we are done. You owe this family. You owe me. I paid for your mother's funeral when you could not afford it. I covered the debts your father left. You think you can just walk away from that because some boy asked you to dance?" "He is 26 years old," Lydia said. "And yes," she hung up. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Lydia worked. She slept. She did not think about the text message from the unknown number, or the hunting lodge in Muju, or the way Jongin Cho had looked at her when he said he wanted to know what she was before her aunt decided it for her. She thought about it constantly. On the 15th day, a package arrived at her apartment. Inside was a plane ticket to Seoul, a business card with an address in Muju, and a single sheet of paper with 6 words written in neat handwriting. Your aunt has made a mistake. Lydia held the paper for a long time. She thought about her job, the 23 people who reported to her, the $42,000 a year that barely covered her rent and her mother's remaining medical debt. She thought about the security clearance she had once held, the 14 months it had taken to process, the way it had felt to stand in front of a reactor core and understand every system that kept it from becoming a catastrophe. She thought about the 11 seconds of silence in that ballroom. Then she called her supervisor and requested 2 weeks of personal leave. The hunting lodge sat in the mountains outside Muju, 3 hours from Seoul by car, surrounded by forest so dense the roads disappeared into shadow. Lydia arrived on a Thursday afternoon in early November, the trees already bare, the air sharp with coming winter. Jongin Cho was waiting on the porch. He looked different than he had at the wedding. Smaller, somehow. More human. He was wearing a sweater instead of a suit, and his hair was slightly disordered, and there was something in his posture that suggested he had not slept well in several days. You came, he said. You sent a plane ticket. Most people do not use them. Lydia climbed the steps to the porch. Up close, she could see the details she had missed in the ballroom. The scar along his jawline, fine as a thread. The slight discoloration under his eyes. The way he held his left shoulder slightly higher than his right, as if compensating for something. What mistake did my aunt make? She said. Jongin looked at her. His expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Come inside, he said. There is something I need to show you. The lodge was old, but well-maintained, all dark wood and hunting trophies and windows that looked out onto the mountains. A fire was burning in the main room. Lydia could smell cedar and smoke and something else underneath, something chemical, like cleaning solution. Jongin led her to a table near the fire. On it were spread a series of photographs, documents, and what looked like architectural blueprints. My family owns a factory outside Muju, he said. Manufacturing, electronics, legitimate, mostly. He paused. The factory shares a water source with a nuclear power plant 20 kilometers north. The cooling system draws from the same aquifer. Lydia looked at the blueprints. Her training came back instantly, the patterns recognizable even after years away. Intake valves, pressure regulators, emergency shutoffs. Someone has been tampering with the monitoring equipment, Jongin said. Small changes, calibration errors, the kind of thing that looks like routine maintenance, but is not. Why are you showing me this? Because I need someone who understands these systems, someone I can trust. He met her eyes. And because your aunt owes money to the people who are doing this. Lydia went still. The debts she mentioned on the phone, Jongin said. Your father's debts. She did not pay them off, she transferred them. To a group that has been pressuring my family for years. She has been feeding them information about our operations, about this factory, about the vulnerabilities in the cooling system. How do you know what she said on the phone? I know many things I should not know. He did not apologize for it. Your aunt believes she is playing both sides. She believes she can use you to get closer to me, to learn more about my family's business. She does not understand that I already know everything she has done. Lydia looked at the blueprints again, at the photographs of equipment she recognized, calibration panels and sensor arrays she had worked with years ago. You want me to find the sabotage. I want you to fix it. I want you to... before someone makes a mistake that poisons half of this province. And my aunt? Jongin's expression did not change. Your aunt will face consequences. Through proper channels. I am not asking you to destroy her. I am asking you to stop what she has set in motion. Lydia thought about the woman who had stood on that stage and smiled while declaring her a failure. The woman who had paid for her mother's funeral and then held it over her head for years. The woman who had invited her to a wedding not to welcome her back, but to display her, to use her, to prove a point about standards and success. "Why me?" she said. "You could hire anyone, consultants, engineers, people who are actually working in the field. Because this needs to be quiet. Because I do not know who else has been compromised. And because..." He paused. Something crossed his face, there and gone. "Because I watched you stand in that ballroom and take what she did to you and not break. That is not common. That is not nothing." Lydia was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind moved through the bare trees. "I have not worked on reactor systems in 3 years. I know. I might not be able to help. I know that too." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal case, the kind that held medication. He set it on the table between them, and she saw his hand tremble slightly as he did. "There are things I do not tell people, about myself, about my limitations. I am trusting you with something because I need you to trust me with something in return." Lydia looked at the case, at his hand, at the way he was watching her, waiting. "I will stay," she said. 1 week. I will look at your systems. I will tell you what I find. And then we will see." That night, Lydia could not sleep. She lay in the guest room of the hunting lodge and stared at the ceiling and thought about everything her aunt had done. The transferred debts, the information fed to dangerous people, the way she had stood on that stage and smiled. She thought about Jongin Cho, the scar on his jaw, the medication case he had set on the table and then quietly put away, the way he spoke about consequences through proper channels, like a man who had seen what other kinds of consequences look like and wanted no part of them. Mostly she thought about the blueprints, the calibration errors, the intake valves and pressure regulators she had not touched in 3 years but still remembered like the layout of her childhood home. Someone was trying to create a disaster. Her aunt was involved. And the only person who could stop it was a woman who had spent the last 3 years answering phones at 2 a.m. and pretending she had never been anything else. The next morning, Lydia walked 3 miles through the forest to the factory. Jongin met her at the gate with a hard hat and a security badge and a look on his face she could not quite read. "Ready," he said. "No," she said, "but show me anyway." They walked into the building together, and Lydia Barber, who had once stood in front of a nuclear cooling tower in a hard hat 2 sizes too big and grinned like she had conquered something, began to remember who she used to be. The work was slow. The sabotage was subtle, hidden in layers of routine maintenance logs and calibration records that looked normal until you knew what to look for. Lydia spent 14 hours a day in the monitoring room, cross-referencing data, tracing anomalies, mapping the pattern of deliberate errors. Jongin checked on her every few hours. He brought her tea she did not ask for. He asked questions that showed he had been reading about reactor systems, teaching himself the basics so he could understand what she was finding. On the 4th day, she caught him wincing as he reached for a file on a high shelf. The movement pulled at something in his left side, and for a moment, his face showed what he had been hiding. "You are hurt," she said. "It is nothing." "It is not nothing. You have been favoring that side since I arrived." He looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them spoke. "Later," he said finally. "When this is done, I will tell you. Promise. I promise." It was not enough, but it was something. On the 6th day, Lydia found the central flaw. A pressure regulator that had been adjusted 3 millimeters out of spec, hidden in a routine service report. If left uncorrected, it would cause a cascade failure within 2 months. The aquifer would be contaminated. The factory would be blamed. Jongin's family would be destroyed. She had found it. She could fix it. And somewhere in Seoul, her aunt was waiting to see what would happen next. The night she found the sabotage, Lydia worked until 3 a.m., correcting the pressure regulator and documenting every adjustment in triplicate. She photographed the original settings. She recorded the serial numbers of the tools she used. She created a chain of evidence that would hold up in any investigation, because she understood that fixing the problem was only half of what needed to happen. The other half was proving who had caused it. She walked back to the lodge through the dark forest, her flashlight cutting a narrow path between the trees. The cold had deepened. Her breath made small clouds in the beam of light. She was thinking about calibration records and maintenance logs and the specific signature of deliberate sabotage when she heard the sound from inside the lodge. It was a crash. Glass breaking. Then silence. Lydia ran. She found Jongin on the floor of the main room, surrounded by the scattered remains of a water glass. He was conscious but pale, one hand pressed against his left side, his breathing shallow and controlled in a way that meant he was managing serious pain. The metal medication case had fallen from his pocket. It had opened on impact, and small white pills were scattered across the floorboards like seeds. "Do not," he said when she knelt beside him. His voice was strained. "I am fine." "You are on the floor." "I am resting." Lydia looked at the pills, at his hand pressed against his side, at the careful way he was breathing, each inhale measured and deliberate. "What is it?" she said. He did not answer immediately. She watched him decide whether to lie, watched him consider and discard several versions of a story that would make this seem smaller than it was. "Liver," he said finally. "Damage from medication I took for years. A side effect no one warned me about." He paused. "It is manageable. It is not fatal. But some days are worse than others." "How long?" "Since I was 22. The viral video. The one that made me famous." His mouth twisted. "I was working under a mentor chef. He was taking credit for my recipes. I knew it. I said nothing. And I was taking pills to manage the anxiety of watching him accept awards for my work." Lydia sat back on her heels. The fire had burned low. The room was cold and dim and smelled of cedar and the sharp chemical scent she now understood was medical. "The medication damaged your liver." "Yes." "And you never said anything? About the recipes? About what he took from you?" "He was my teacher. He gave me my start. I thought—"
Jongin closed his eyes. "I thought loyalty meant silence, even when the silence was costing me everything." Lydia looked at him, at the scar on his jaw, at the way he held himself even now, even on the floor, like a man who had learned to carry weight without showing it. "Can you stand?" she said. "I believe so."
She helped him up. He leaned on her more than he wanted to, she could tell, but he did not apologize. They made it to the couch by the fire. She found a blanket. She collected the scattered pills and put them back in the case. "The factory," he said. "The sabotage. Did you find it?" "I fixed it. I documented everything. Your family is safe." Something moved across his face. Relief, maybe, or something closer to grief. "My aunt," Lydia said. "Lydia. You said she would face consequences through proper channels. What does that mean?" Jongin was quiet for a moment. The fire crackled. "It means I have evidence of what she has done. The information she sold. The people she sold it to. The money she received." He paused. "It means I could destroy her. Publicly. Completely. I could make sure she never holds power over anyone in your family again. But that is not what you want." Lydia thought about the ballroom, the 11 seconds of silence, the way her cousin had looked away. "No," she said, "it is not." "Then what do you want?" She did not answer immediately. She had been asking herself the same question for weeks. What would make this right? What would undo the humiliation, the years of obligation, the way her aunt had used her and discarded her and then used her again? I want her to face what she did, Lydia said finally. In front of the people whose opinion she cares about. I want them to know the truth. But I do not want her destroyed. I do not want to become what she is. Jongin looked at her. His eyes were dark and steady. That is harder, he said. That requires precision. That requires her to keep enough of her life that she has to live with what everyone now knows. Yes. You understand what you are choosing. You could end her. You could take everything. And you are choosing not to. I am choosing to be someone I can live with. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire burned. Outside, the wind moved through the bare trees. There's a meeting, Jongin said. Tomorrow evening, in Seoul. The same people who were at your cousin's wedding. Your aunt arranged it. She believes she is negotiating a new arrangement, a way to increase her influence with the people pressuring my family. She does not know you have the evidence. She does not know anything, except that you have been here, and that she is afraid of what that means. Lydia was silent. She thought about the documentation she had created, the photographs, the maintenance records, the clear trail from deliberate sabotage to the people her aunt had been working with. I want to be there, she said. I know. I want to speak. I want to tell them what I found. Not you. Me. Jongin looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. There and gone. That is what I was hoping you would say. The meeting was held in a private room at a hotel in Gangnam. 12 people seated around a long table. Lydia recognized some of them from the wedding. Her aunt was at the head of the table, dressed in dark blue, her posture perfect, her smile fixed in place. She had not expected Lydia. What is she doing here? Jung-suk-mok said. Her voice was controlled, but Lydia could hear the edge underneath. She's here because I invited her, Jongin said. He was standing near the door, his posture careful, his face unreadable. She has something to share with all of you. Lydia stepped forward. She was wearing clothes she had borrowed from the lodge, simple and dark, nothing like the catering uniform she had worn at the wedding. She set a folder on the table. 3 weeks ago, she said, someone adjusted a pressure regulator at the Cho family factory in Muju. The adjustment was small, 3 millimeters. It was hidden in a routine maintenance report. If left uncorrected, it would have caused a cascade failure in the cooling system within 2 months. The aquifer that supplies both the factory and a nuclear power plant 20 kilometers north would have been contaminated. She opened the folder, photographs, documents, the evidence she had gathered. I found the sabotage, I corrected it, and I traced the maintenance reports to a contractor who was being paid by someone in this room. She looked at her aunt. The room was silent. The payments came through a shell company, Lydia said. But the account holder is listed. The transfers are documented. The evidence is clear. Jung-suk-mok stood up. Her face had gone pale. You have no right, she said. You have no standing here. You are nothing. You work at a call center. You serve champagne at weddings. Who do you think you are? I'm a nuclear engineer, Lydia said. Howard University, class of 2016. I spent 3 years monitoring reactor systems for a power plant in Virginia. I held a security clearance that took 14 months to process. I am not what you told them I was. I am not what you tried to make me. She closed the folder. The evidence in front of you is copies. The originals have been submitted to the appropriate authorities. There will be an investigation. There will be consequences. But that is not why I am here. She turned to face the room. 12 faces watching her. Some hostile, some curious, some beginning to understand. I am here because I wanted you to know the truth. About the sabotage, about who arranged it. About the woman who has been presenting herself as the keeper of this family's standards while selling information to people who would have poisoned half a province. She looked at her aunt. I'm not going to destroy you. I'm not going to take your house or your money or your reputation. The authorities will decide what happens next. But you will live with the fact that everyone in this room now knows what you are. And every time you walk into a gathering like this one, they will remember. Young-suk Mok said nothing. Her mouth was a thin line. Lydia picked up the folder. That is all I came to say. She turned and walked toward the door. Jongin was waiting there, his expression quiet. You could have let me do that, he said, low enough that only she could hear. I know. Why did you not? Lydia looked back at the room. At her aunt, still standing, still pale, surrounded by people who were already beginning to talk. Because I needed to know I could, she said. Because I needed her to see who was speaking, not your power, not your family, me. She walked out of the room. Jongin followed. Behind them, the murmur of voices rose like water beginning to boil. 6 months later, Lydia stood on the terrace of a building in Seoul, watching the city lights come on one by one as evening settled over the skyline. The air was warm. Spring had arrived. Behind her, through the glass doors, she could hear the soft sounds of a restaurant preparing for the dinner service. Jongin found her there. He moved quietly, but she had learned to recognize his footsteps, the particular rhythm of a man who had spent years carrying weight without showing it. The new systems engineer starts Monday, he said. She wants to meet you. She read your report on the Muju facility. I'm not sure what I would tell her. Tell her what you told me. That precision matters. That attention matters. That the people who notice small things are the ones who prevent large disasters. Lydia turned to look at him. The scar along his jaw was visible in the fading light. His left shoulder still sat slightly higher than his right, but his color was better now, his breathing easier. The new medication was working. He had finally let her take him to a proper specialist. Your aunt's trial starts next month, he said. I know. You do not have to testify. I know that too. She looked back at the city. Somewhere out there, her aunt was preparing a defense that would not work. The evidence was too clear. The consequences were coming. But Lydia felt no satisfaction in that, only a tired relief and the knowledge that she had chosen correctly. Stay, Jongin said. The word was simple. His voice was not. Lydia looked at him, at the man who had crossed a ballroom floor to ask her to dance, who had trusted her with his family's safety and then with his own vulnerability, who had watched her stand in front of a room full of powerful people and speak her own truth. Yes, she said. She had learned that dignity was not given. It was chosen, over and over, in small moments no one else would remember. She had learned that the people who see you clearly are rare and worth holding on to. She had learned that home was not a place you returned to. It was a place you built, slowly, with someone who understood what the building cost. The city lights spread out below them like scattered seeds, and Lydia Barber stayed. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and tell me the moment you knew she was going to choose her own way instead of his power. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, and I promise the next story will be even harder to walk away from. Thank you for watching until the very end. I will see you in the next one.